The Iliad by Homer. Achilles' wrath to Greece the dire spring of whose unnumbered heavenly goddess sing, that wrath which hurled to Pluto's gloomy Rhine, and souls of mighty chiefs untimely slain, whose limbs unburied uh, on the naked shore, devouring dogs and the hungry vulture tore, since great Achilles and the tried store, such was the sovereign doom and such the will of Jove. Declare, O Muse, in what ill-fated hour sprung the fierce strife, from what offended power Latuna's sons a dire contingent spread, and heaped the camp the mountains of the dead. The king of men his reverend priest defied, and for the king's offence that people die. The Kyries sought with costly gifts to gain his captive daughter from the victor's chain. Suppliant the venerable father stands, Apollo's awful ensigns grace his hands. By these he begs, and lowly bending down, extends the sceptre and the laurel crown, and issue to all, but chief implored for grace the brother king of Patriots' royal race. Ye kings and warriors, may your vows be crowned, and Troy's proud walls lie level with the ground. May Jove restore you when your tours are over, safe to the pleasures of your native shore. But oh, relieve a wretched pair in Spain, and give crisis to cries to these arms again. If mercy fail, yet let my presence move, and dread avenging Phoebus, son of Jove. The Greeks in shouts their joint assent declare, the priest to reverence and release the fire. Not so stride he, the kingly pride, that repulsed the sacred shire, and thus replied, hands on thy life, and fly these hostile pains, nor ask presumptuous what the king detains, hence with the laurel crown and the golden rod, nor trust too far those ensigns of thy God. Mine is thy daughter, priest, and shall remain, and prayers and tears and bribes shall plead in vain, till time shall rifle every youthful grace, and age dismiss her from the cold embrace, in the daily labors of the loom employed, or the doom dark bed she once enjoyed. Hence then the Argos shall be made retire, far from her native soil and weeping shire. The trembling priest along the shore written, and in the anguish of a father mourned, disconsolate, not daring not to complain, silent he wandered by the sounding main, till, safe at distance, to his God he prays, the gods who dance around his world, his rays. Ocementeus sprung from the fair Latona's line, the guardian power of Celia the divine, thou source of light, whom Tendius adores, and whose bright presence gilds thy Caesar's source. And before the wreaths I hung my sacred train, or feed the flames what fat of oxen slain. God of the silver bow, thy shafts employ, avenge thy servant, and Greeks destroy. Thus Christ prayed, and favoring power attends, and from Olympus' lofty tops descends. Bent was his bow, the Grecian hearts to wound, fierce as he moved, his silver shaft resound, breathing revenge. A sudden night he spread, and glooming darkness rolled about his head. The feat is view, he twangled his deadly bow, and hissing fly the feather fates below. On mules and dogs the infections first began, at last the vengeful arrows fixed in man for 9 long nights. Through all the dusky air, the pirates' thick flamings shot a dismal glare, and ere the 10th, before day was run, inspired by Juno, Titus' godlike son, convened to counsel all the Grecian train. For much the goddess mourned her hero slain, the assembly seated, rising over the rest. Achilles thus the king of men addressed, why leave we not the fatal Trojan shore, and measure back the seas we crossed before, the plague destroying whom the sword would spare? 'Tis time to save the few remains of war, but let some prophet or some sacred sage explore the cause of great Apollo's rage, or learn the wasteful vengeance to remove by mystic dreams, for dreams descend from Jove. If broken vows this heavy curse have laid, let altars smoke and hectombs be paid. So heaven atoned, shall dying Greece restore the Phoebus dart, his burning shafts no more. He said and said, when Calchas thus replied, Calchas the wise, the Grecian priest and guide, the sacred seer, whose comprehensive view the past, the present, the future knew, uprising slow, the venerable sage, thus spoke the prudence and the fears of age, beloved of Jove, Achilles, would thou know why angry Phoebus bent his fatal bow? First give thy fate, and plight a prince word of short protection by thy power and sword. For I must speak that wisdom would conceal, and truths insidious to the great reveal. Bold is the task when subjects grown to wise instruct a monarch where his heiress lies. For though we deem the short-lived fury past, 'tis sure the mighty will revenge at last. To whom Pelides, from thy inmost soul, speak what thou know, and speak without control, even by the God, I swear, who rules the day, to whom thy hands the vows of the Greeks convey, and whose blessed oracles thy lips declare. Long as Achilles breathes this fatal air, no daring Greek of all numerous band against his breach shall lift in impious hand, not even the chief by whom our hosts are led, the King of kings, shall touch the sacred head. Encouraged thus, the blameless man replies, nor vows unpaid, nor unslight to sacrifice, but he, our chief, provoked the raging pest. Apollo's vengeance for his injured priest, nor will the god awaken fury cease, but plagues shall spread and funeral fires increase, till the great king, without a ransom paid, to her Cyressa send the black-eyed maid, perhaps with added sacrifice and prayer, the priest may pardon and the god may spare. The prophet spoke when a gloomy frown the monarch started from his shining throne. A black choler filled his breast that boiled with ire, and from his eyes balls flashed the living fire. Agur accused, denouncing mischief, still prophet of plagues, for ever boding ill, still must the tongue some wounding message bring, and still thy priest pride provoke the king. For this our Phoebus oracle explored, to the teachings of the Greeks, to the murmur at their laud. For this what falsehood is my honor stained? Is heaven offended and the priest profaned? Because my prize, my beauteous maid I hold, and heavenly charms prefer to proffered gold. A maid unmatched in manners as in face, skilled in each art and crowned with every grace. Not half so dear were chrysanthemum's charms, when first her blooming beauties blessed my arms. Yet if the gods demand her, let her sail. Our cares are only for the public weal. Let me be deemed the hateful cause of all, and suffer rather than my people fall. The prize, the beauteous prize, I will resign, so dearly valued and so justly mine. But just for common good, I yield the fair my private laws. Let this grateful Greece repair, not unrewarded. Let your prince complain, and let he alone has fought and bleed in vain. Insatiate king Achilles thus replied, fond of the power, but fonder of the prize. Thou would thou the Greeks their lawful praise shall yield the due reward of many a well-fought field, the spoils of the city razed, and warriors slain, we share with justice, as as with toil we gain. But to resume, whatever the avarice craves, the thick of tyrants may be borne us by slaves. Yet if our chiefs for plunder only fight, the spoils of Ilion shall be lost requited whenever by Jove's decree our conquering power shall humble to the dust her lofty towers. Then thus the king, my shall I my prize resign with tame content, and thou passest possessed of thine, great as thou art, and like a god in fight, think not to rob me of soldiers' right. At thy demand shall I restore the maid. First let the just equivalent be paid. Such a king might ask, and let it be a treasures worthy her and worthy me, or grant me this, or what, or with a monarch's claim, this hand shall seize some other captive dame, the mighty accept shall His prize resigned, Ulysses spoils in even thine own. Be mine, a man who suffers loudly may complain, and rage he may, but he shall rage in vain. But this when time requires, it now remains. We launch a bark to plough the water plains, and walk the sacrifice of Kairos' shore, with chosen pilots and with labouring oars. Soon shall be the fair, the sable ship ascend, and some de- deputed friends the charge attend, and the Creta's kings and the Ajax shall fulfill, or vice Ulysses see performed our will, or if our royal pleasure shall ordain Achilles self conduct her over the main. Let fierce Achilles, dreadful in his rage, and the god propitiate, and the past is huge. At this Iliad's frowning stern replied, O tyrant, armed with in insolence and pride, inglorious slave to interest, ever joined with fraud unworthy of a royal mind, what generous Greek, obedient to thy word, shall form an ambush or shall lift the sword? What cause shall I to war at thy decree? The distant Trojans never injured me. To to Phthia's realms no hostile troops they led, safe in her vales by warlike Croesus' feet far hence remove the hordes' resounding main, and walls of rocks, and secure my native vine, whose fruitful soil luxuriant havens grace, rich in her fruit, and in martial race. Hither we sail a voluntary throng, to avenge a private, not a public wrong. What else to Troy the assembled nation draw, and thine ungrateful and thy brother's cause? Is this the pay our blood and toils deserve, disgraced and injured by the man we reserve? We serve the dearest thou threat to snatch my pride away, due to the deeds of many a dreadful day. A price so small, O tyrant, matched with thine, as thou own actions if compared to mine. Thine in each conquest is the wealthy prey. Thou mine the sweat, the danger of the day. Some trivial present to my ships I bear, or barren praises pay the wounds of the war. But no, proud monarch, I am thy slave no more. My fleet shall waft to me Thalicia's shores, left by Achilles on the Trojan plain. What spoils, what conquest shall Atrides gain? To, to this king fly, mighty warrior, fly. Thy aid we need not, and thy threats defy. There want not chief in such a cause to fight, and Jove himself shall guard a monarch right. Of all the kings the god distinguish care, to power superior none such hatred bear. Strife and debate their restless soul employ, and the wars and the heroes are the sage's joy. If thou had strength, 'twas heaven that strength bestowed, for now, vain man, thy valour is from God. Haste, launch thy vessels, fly with speed away, rule thy realms with arbitrary sway. I heed not thee not, but prize at equal rate thy short-lived friendship and thy groundless hate. Go thread thy earth-born Marindos, but here 'tis mine to threaten, prince, and thine to fear. No, if the god, the beauteous dame, demand my bark, shall waft her to her native land. But then prepare, imperious prince, prepare. Fierce as thou art, to yield thy captive fair, even in thy tent I'll seize the bluing prize. Thy love braces with the radiant eyes, hence shalt thou prove my point, prove my might, and curse the hour that thou stoodst, a rival of imperial power, and hence to all the host it shall be known that the king are the subjects to the gods alone. Achilles heard with grief and rage oppressed, his heart swelled high and labored in his breast, distracting thoughts by turning his bosoms ruled, now fired by wrath and now by reason cooled, that prompts his hands to draw a deadly sword, force through the Greeks and pierce his hasty lord. This whispers soft his vengeance to the control and calm the raging tempest of his soul, just as in anguish of suspense he stayed, while half unsheathed appeared the glittering blade. Minerva, Minerva's ship descended from above, sent by the sister and the wife of Jove. For both the princes claimed her equal care. Behind she stood, and by the golden hair Achilles seized to him alone confessed the sable could concealed her from the rest. He sees the sudden of the goddess cries, and known by the flames that sparkle from her eyes. Descent Manevra in her guardian care, a heavenly witness of the wrongs I bear from Atreus' son, and let those eyes that view the daring crime behold the vengeance too. Forbear the progeny of Jove replies, to calm thy fury I forsake the sky. Let great Achilles to the gods resign to reason yield the emperor his mind. The awful the awful Juno, this command is given the king, and you are both the care of heaven. The force of keen approaches reproaches let him feel, but steep, obedient, and revenging steel. For I pronounce and trust a heavenly power. Thy injured honor has its fated hour, when the proud monarch shall thy arms implore, and bribe thy friendship with a boundless store, and revenge no longer bear the sword. Command thy passions, and the gods obey. To her Pelides, Pelides with grateful ear, 'tis just, O goddess, I thy dictates hear heard hard as it is my vengeance I suppress. Those who revere the gods will bless, he said, observant of the blue-eyed maid. Then in the steep return thy shining blade. The goddess swift to high Olympus flies, and joined the sacred senate of the sky, nor yet the rage his boiling breast forsook. Thus Thus redoubling on his stride broke, O monster mixed of insolence and fear, thou dog in forehand but in heart a dear, when wert thou known in ambush fight to dare, or nobly face the horrid front of war? 'Tis ours the chance of fighting the fields to try, thine to look on and bid the valiant rise. So much it's safer through the camp to go and rob a subject than despoil a foe. Scores of thy people, violent ways, sent in Jove's anger on a slavish race, who, lost to the senses of generous freedom past, are tamed to the wrongs, or this had been thy last. Now by the sacred spittier, hear me swear, which never mortal leaves or blossoms bear, which served from the trunk as from thee, on the bare mountains left its parent tree, this sphere formed by tempered steel to prove an ensign of the delegates of Jove, from whom the power of the laws and justice sprang, tremendous oath inviolate to king. By this I swear, when bleeding Greece again shall call Achilles, we shall call in vain when, flushed with slaughter, Hector comes to spread the purple shore with mountains of the dead. Then shalt thou mourn the affront that thy madness gave, forced to deplore when important to save, the rage in bitterness of the soul to know this act has made the bravest Greek thy foe. He spoke, the furious hurled against the ground. His pitier started with golden studs again, and then sternly sat aside. With like disdain, the raging king returned his frown again. To calm their passion with words of aid, slow from his seat arose the Pelian sage, experienced Nestor, in persuasion skilled, words sweet as honey from his lips distilled. 2 generations now had passed away, wise by his rules and happy by his sway. 2 ages over his native realm he reigned, and now the example of the third remained, and viewed with awe the venerable man, and thus the wild benevolence began. What shame, what woe is this to Greece, what joy to Troy's proud monarch and the friends of Troy. The adverse gods commit to stern debate, the best, the bravest, the Grecian state. Young as ye are, this youthful heat restrain. Nor think your Nestor's ears and wisdom vain, and godlike race of heroes once I knew. Such no more these aged eyes shall see. Lives there a chief to match Phrygians, Phrygia's fame, Darius the bold, the Senes' deathless name. Theseus, Theseus endued with more than mortal might of Polymus, like the golden fight. With these of old to toils of battle bred in early youth, my hardly days I led, fired with thy thrust, with virtuous envy breeze, and smit the love of honorable deeds. Strongest of men, they pierce the mountain bow, range the wild deserts red with monstrous gore, and from these hills of shaggy Centaurs tore, yet these with soft persuasive arts I sway. When Nestor spoke, they listened and obeyed. If in my youth even these esteem me wise, do you, young warriors, hear my age advice? Atrides seize not on the beauteous slave, and the prize the Greeks by common suffrage gave. Thou, Achilles, treat our own prince with pride. Let kings with just and sovereign power preside. Thee the first honors of the war adorn, like God in strength, and of God is born. Him awful majesty exalts above, and the powers of the earth, accepted sons of Jove, let both unite with well consenting mind, well consenting mind. So shall authority with strength be joined, leave me king to the calm Achilles' rage. Rule thou thyself as more advanced in age. Forbid it, gods. Achilles shouted be lost, the pride of Greece, the bulwark of our host. Thus said, he sees the king of men replies, thy ears are awful and thy words are wise, but what unconquered soul, no laws can limit, no respect control. Before his pride must his superior fall. His words, the law be the Lord of all. Him must our host, our chiefs, our self obey. What king can bear a rival in his sway? Grant that the gods his matchless force has given. His foul reproach a privilege from heaven. Here on the monarch's speech Achilles broke and furious, and thus interrupting spoke, Tyrant, I well deserve the galling chain to live thy slave, and still to serve in vain. Should I submit to each unjust decree, command thy vessels, but command not me, seize or Briseis, whom Grecians doom, my prize of war, yet tamely we resumed, the seas secure, no more Achilles draws his conquering sword in any woman's cause. The gods command me to forgive the past, and let the first invasion be last. And for thou blood, when next thou darest invade, shall stream in vengeance on my wrecking blade. And this they seize, the stern debates expire, the chiefs in sullen majesty retired. Achilles with Patroclus took his way, where Where near his tents his hollow vessels lay. Meantime Atreus launched with numerous oars a well-rigged ship by Chrysa's scared shores. High on the deck was Perseus placed, and the sage Ulysses with the conduct graced. Safe in her sides the hecatomb they stowed. Then swiftly sailing cut the liquid draught. The horse to expiate next the king prepares. With pure illustrations and with solemn prayers, washed by the brainy wave and the poised rain, and Arcleans the cast the evolutions in the main. Along the shores whole tombs were laid, and the bulls and the gods of Phoebus altars paid. The sable fumes in curling spires arise and walk their grateful doors to start. The army thus in sacred rites engaged, it tried still with deep resentment rage to wait his will. Two scared heralds stood, Cly- Clytibius and Eurybates the god. Haste to the fierce Achilles' tent, he cries. Then spear Briseis as a roll. Prize submit he must, or they will not part. Ourselves in arm shall tear from her heart, shall tear her from his heart. The unwilling heralds act their lord's command. Pensive they walk among the barren sands. Arrive the hero in his tent, they find the gloomy aspect of his arm reclined at the awful distance. Long the silent stand, loth to advance and speak to their heart command. Decent confusion, this the godlike man perceived, and thus with the assent mild began. With leave and honor entered with leave and honor enter our abodes, ye sacred ministers of men and gods. I know your message by constraint you came, no, not you by your imperious lord I blame. Patroclus, haste and fair Briseis king, conduct my captive to the haughty king, but witness heralds and proclaim thy vow, witness to the God above and man below. But first and loudest, but first and loudest to your prince declare the lawless tyrant above, whose commands you bear, unmoved unmoved as that Achilles shall remain, though prostrate Greece shall bleed at every vein, the reigning chief in frantic possession lost, blind to himself and useless to his horse, unskilled to judge the future by past, in blood and slaughter shall repent at last. Patroclus, now the unwilling beauty brought, she in soft sorrows and in pensive thought, past silent and heralds held her hand and oft looked back, slow moving over the strand. Not Saul his lost the fierce Achilles war, but sad, retiring to the sounding shore, over the wild margin of deep he hung, that the kindred deep from whence his mother sprung. There bathed in the tears of anger and disdain, thus loud lamented to stormy main, O parent goddess, since in every bloom thy son must fall, too severe a doom, sure to so short a race of glory born, great Jove injustice should this span adorn, honor and fame, lest the thunder ode, and ill he pays the promise of a god. If yon proud monarch thus thy son defies, obscures my glories and resumes my prize, far from the deep recess of the main, where aged ocean hold his watery reign, the goddess mother heard, and the waves divide, and like a mist she rose from the tide, beheld his mourning on the naked shore, and thus the sorrows of his soul explores. Why grieves my son? Thy anguish let me share. Reveal the cause, and thus the parent's care. He deeply sighing said, to tell me woe is but to mention what too well was known. From Thebes sacred to Apollo's name, Asian Asian's realm our conquering army came.